In today's video, I'm gonna explain exactly how you get shredded naturally, how I went from looking like this to looking like this, how I had my client Brian DaCosta win the World Natural Bodybuilding Federation looking like this, how I had my client Daraja get 4th at the Bikini Olympia as a natural athlete. I'm gonna explain to you the nutrition, the cardio, the training, the supplementation, and how long it's gonna take, and we're starting right now. Hey guys, what's going on? This is Paul Ravella from ProPhysique.com, and as you guys saw there, I got a question about how to get shredded naturally, and there are some differences when it comes down to losing body fat without the help of steroids or some other type of things that are going to help you lean out and change the physique. And I want to explain exactly how I, as a lifetime natural bodybuilder, have done it over the last couple years. I'll show you some highlights of some of my leanest pictures here, guys. I'm a lifetime natural bodybuilder. I began competing in bodybuilding in 2009, earned my professional status then, and I've competed many times since then. And every time I diet down, I learn a little bit more. I also want to be quite honest. I've made a lot of mistakes. I've learned some things over the years that I really want to share with you. Some methods that I used, both from previous coaching experiences where I hired a coach and experiments that I've run on myself and things that I've seen other people do. I've tried to figure out the best way. The goal for me as an athlete and as a coach and somebody to help you guys is not to make things harder on myself, right? So I don't do things the way I do them because it's the most challenging. I do them because it's the way that works. And not only does it help me get shredded, it helps me stay shredded. I've learned along the way things that have helped me get shredded definitely hurt me in the long run, especially as a natural bodybuilder. There's some things that we got to talk about. So we're going to start with nutrition. When it comes to nutrition as a natural bodybuilder, you really need to be accountable to your macronutrients. And why, when I say macronutrients, is that important when it comes to natural lifters? When you are injecting your body with exogenous hormones, it's then not as necessary for your body to produce them. And there are some things that we can eat and ingest that are going to make sure that we are producing the right amount of hormones. So we'll get into that. Let's talk about where we start with calories. If you want to get shredded, the first thing you have to do, for most people, I actually have them do a diet recall. I have them track their calories for a week. Now, if you're someone who is regimented and you eat the same thing every day, shoot, maybe you only track for 2 days or 3 days. But for the most part, what I find is that most people have huge swings in calories. So they might tell me that, yeah, I eat about 2,000 calories a day. I say track and don't change anything. And guess what? 3,400 calories one day, 1,700 calories the next. But they remember that they ate the 1,700 calories and that's what they report. However, they were actually eating 3,400 calories some days. So why does that matter? Well, because when you're starting a caloric deficit, you don't want to start too aggressively, all right? And we're going to talk about the proper rate of fat loss at the end of this video. But you don't want to be too aggressive with calories because typically what happens is when you adjust, you bring calories down. And we're going to talk about when that's actually the wrong thing to do as well. But the idea here is we want to find out our average calories, take that average, start being accountable. Now, with my athletes that are getting competitive and getting shredded, I call this next phase robot mode. And what I mean by that is we get in the zone with our meal prepping, with our tracking, and we just get so consistent that it makes everything easy. And a lot of people hesitate when I tell them that you need to track your calories and track your macronutrients. But what you don't realize is that with today's technology, it literally only takes a few seconds. You literally hit a button on your phone that says, I ate a banana. And then if you eat the same meal tomorrow that you ate today, which a lot of us do, you just put repeat meal 1. Boom, you've just tracked for the day, right? You've tracked in a matter of touching a phone. So I think it can sound a little bit more intimidating than it is. And as soon as you start doing it, it's very freeing. So being accountable to this, let's say we're starting off at like an average of 3,000 calories. We know we can put ourselves in a deficit through the use of some activity, maybe some cardiovascular, but also just dropping those calories down to 2,700. Where if you would have told me that you were actually eating 2,000, but you're eating 4, I'm going to start your deficit around the 2,000 calorie marker below, right? And so it's going to be a much different experience. And I think especially for those of us that are taking the natural route, it's important that we're protecting our metabolism, we're protecting our muscle, we're protecting our hormones and our digestive system. So let's talk about those macronutrients. Protein is the easiest one. I will say most people overconsume protein for the benefits of muscle building, but let's say 1 gram per your goal weight, right? And if you're a pretty lean guy, I'm 215 pounds. I don't know what I am right now, but I'm probably 10 to 12% body fat. I'm 215 pounds. 200 to 220 grams of protein a day is plenty for my needs for building muscle and repairing muscle and all those things. It also keeps me nice and full. So that's where you should be, either a gram per pound of your goal weight or a gram per pound of your current lean if you're very lean. If you're trying to get shredded, it is important that you be already kind of lean or you're not going to get to shredded. We'll talk about the timeline at the end. Let's talk about the next most important macronutrient is fats. Now, why are fats so important if you are a natural lifter? Fats start the cascade of hormones. When you ingest fat, it is broken down and it is turned into the hormones in our body. Now, if you're a natural bodybuilder, natural lifter, and you're not injecting yourself with testosterone, guess what? You need to produce it yourself. And in fact, if you are injecting yourself with testosterone, which many people on TRT are doing, you stop your body's production of testosterone, right? So that's why us as natural lifters, we need to focus on making sure we're getting the right amount of fat. So what is that? I'll typically say as a guideline, 20% of your total calories should be from fat. I really don't like my men to go below 50 grams of fat a day. I will take them down to 45 grams, maybe 40 if they're smaller, but usually 40 to 50 grams of fat a day is my basement for fat intake. And I'll also include some of the supplements at the end of this that are going to make sure that we're getting quality fats. And then it comes to carbohydrates. And this is where I think a lot of misconception comes from. Carbohydrates are so powerful for fat loss. That's right. They help fat loss. Most people that think of carbohydrates think of it as it increases our insulin and then we're going to store body fat. None of that matters if you're in a caloric deficit, okay? In fact, insulin is, listen to me, anabolic. That's a good thing. Carbohydrates are actually protein sparing, means it prevents the breakdown of muscle in our body. It also improves our performance. And if you're trying to get shredded, you need to be keeping and building muscle. So carbohydrates are great for performance. Now, I will say this, carbohydrates are the macronutrient that gets adjusted the most, right? If we're going to be pulling a lot of calories out of our diet, you're going to get your fats to a point where they're not going to go much lower. You're going to have those carbohydrates fluctuate. Now, when do I worry about carbohydrate intake? Is when they get below someone's body weight. So for me, like I told you, I'm 215 pounds. If my carbohydrates get to 200 grams or below, I notice that I start to need higher carbohydrate days, or on the days that I train with more intensity, depending on what you're doing, for someone like myself that's doing, like, say, a very intense lower body day, I might bump my carbohydrates up to 300 grams. Now, you have to do this in the context of a plan that you've created, but the idea here is that we are using carbohydrates to improve our fat loss because, repeat after me, fat burns in a carbohydrate flame, right? So carbohydrates are great for fat loss. They're also great for performance. They're great for mood. They're also great for muscle fullness. If you've ever had like a cheat meal or gone out to eat and, eaten a bunch of food and you look better the next day, a lot of that is the glycogen, the sodium, and the water that is then being stored in the muscles, giving your muscles a fuller, rounder look, which is very important because it's not only physiology when it comes to getting shredded. You also have to understand the psychology. I know a lot of people that quit cutting because they say they feel skinny, but they've been on low carbs for so long. So I define low carbs as anything below your body weight in carbs, right? So if you're at 150 pounds and you get to 100 grams of carbs a day, you're probably going to be having either some brain fog, suffering some energy, muscle flatness, and performance issues in the gym, not lifting as much weight. We need to start including things like refeed days, which are increases in carbohydrates, or diet breaks. The next most important thing that I want to touch on, I'm not going to go deep into this, is training. What builds muscle keeps muscle. So do not change your training if you are trying to get leaner, trying to get shredded. You will risk muscle loss. Now, I do have a philosophy around natural bodybuilding that I think is very important, and I think you should be hitting every body part twice a week, okay? And if not exactly within that week, let's say twice every, 7 to 8 days, you want to be hitting those body parts. I made this mistake many years ago. I got into a typical lifting program that was being promoted from magazines, and I was hitting arms one day, shoulders one day, chest one day, back one day, legs one day. I never made progress. In fact, I was actually quite unhappy with how I looked. And I also never got better in the gym. My performance did not improve. That whole week off, I was underutilizing the skill usage. If you think of lifting as a skill, if you do a barbell squat on Monday and you don't do it again until the next Monday, that skill that you've learned from, bracing and holding and squatting can be unlearned. However, if you're doing it twice a week, you're reinforcing that skill. You're also teaching your muscles how to fire better. It's also been shown that muscle protein synthesis is increasing twice per week instead of once. So it is important that we are training each body part twice a week, in my opinion. That is what I find has been best for me. And again, guys, listen, I've made the mistakes. I've learned from it. And I'm coaching athletes at the highest level of the world, winning world championships, and seeing these results from this. And so really want to encourage you guys to just continue to train more frequently. So that's it. I'll keep the training short. This isn't about bodybuilding. This is about getting shredded. Now, let's talk cardio. This was probably the biggest mistake that I made early on in my bodybuilding career. My first coach had me doing high intensity cardio. Now, high intensity intervals, for those that aren't aware, HIIT cardio, true HIIT cardio, is where you sprint all out, life or death. Now, we can only do this for maybe 10 to 15 seconds, okay, before we are gassed. But I was doing this twice per week, sometimes 3 days per week for 30-minute sessions where I would sprint and then rest for a minute or two and sprint again. I would do different varieties. I would sprint outside on hills. I would do it on a spin bike. I would even do things like pushing sleds. Whatever it was, that HIIT cardio, looking back at it now, I realized that it was actually more problematic. Let me explain why. Later on in my career, what I started doing was paying attention to my total activity throughout the day and not so much just my cardio sessions. So the reason that the HIIT cardio was so problematic for me as a bodybuilder, when you're doing HIIT cardio, you are using glycogen, carbohydrates, as your fuel source. So you are burning through the carbohydrates that are in your muscles. I found that this had two impacts. One, I was very depleted and run down for my workouts. Again, my goal was not to be the best sprinter in the world, but to be the best bodybuilder at that time that I could be. So it wasn't really positively impacting my performance in the gym. Thus, perhaps I sacrificed a little bit of muscle doing that. Second, I also noticed that it vastly increased my hunger. Being hungry is something that we accept when we're trying to get shredded. However, this was beyond what I would consider normal hunger, right? And I would literally be watching the clock all day, every day, especially when I did HIIT cardio. The real thing that I've noticed when I've gotten rid of HIIT cardio, and what I didn't notice back then, was that my activity throughout the rest of the day was kaput. In fact, if I knew that I had a HIIT cardio session, like, okay, later today, I'm going to get my sled out. I'm going to do, 15-second sprints on my driveway with the sled. If I knew I was doing that, guess what I did the rest of that day? Nothing. I rested all day before and I rested after. Why the switch? Well, if you look at the 24-hour window of activity, the time that we're awake, we'll say 16 hours a day, roughly, it's really negatively impacted when you're doing HIIT cardio, meaning our total energy expenditure throughout the day comes from non-exercise activity included in our exercise activity. When you burn a ton of calories in a short amount of time doing one activity, but you burn none the rest of the day, is that better for you than if you just burn your normal amount of calories the rest of the day and do little cardio sessions that don't impact that? I would say that that is the case, and I'll give you multiple reasons why. So what cardio do I prefer for natural lifters? Low intensity, steady state. Now, not everybody has the time to commit to this, but if you're looking at somebody like Brian DaCosta, who was the world natural bodybuilding champion last year, he won the overall title, his preferred cardio was a treadmill desk. That's right. Now, that means all day, every day, he's just constantly moving, right? He would do some outside walking, but Brian's training in the gym is more intense than yours. He's a strong, badass mother effer, right? He trains like a beast. We don't want to negatively impact that by also having to back that up with crazy cardio. So what we found was that through keeping him active throughout the day, and I could adjust his steps or his cardio, it would not negatively impact his training. That's the first thing. Second, when you do lower intensity means more fat burning, okay? Meaning your body is in lipolysis or it's breaking down fat for fuel. This means hunger signals are not as impacted as when you're burning glycogen. This is something that I noticed. I also noticed I didn't get cold. And for anyone that's ever dieted down and got shredded, you start to accept the fact that you're going to be cold during this time. And I noticed when I was doing HIIT cardio, I would often be cold. I also noticed my resting heart rate got so low, like in the 30s, that I would often get dizzy when I stood up, which is not a problem if you're adapted to high intensity cardio for your specific sport. I didn't need to be. I found that my body temperature was better regulated and I never got dizzy. I never had blood pressure issues when I just do my walking. Now, before you scoff at walking to get shredded, if you haven't walked on an incline treadmill at a good pace, I promise you it can be very challenging. And what I tell my athletes, when we're doing cardio, the goal should be to have your body temperature come up to the point where you're breaking a light sweat or you feel a little glisten. Why is that? To me, that means we're getting in a thermogenic response. We're warming the body up and getting going. So as you progress throughout your diet, the leaner you get, the less body fat you get, it's going to be a little bit more of a challenge to get your body temperature up to burn those calories. So over the course of a prep, you can go from flat walking all the way to incline walking at a good pace where you're actually huffing and puffing, right? That's what I do. Okay, so when it comes to cardio, remember, not always more intense is better. If you love it, do it. But I'm telling you from my own personal experience of dieting and what I would consider, listen, I looked great, but I also struggled. As soon as that diet was over, I didn't want to do any cardio. I didn't want to track anything. I no longer have those issues, okay? I still diet down, did a show last year and won. The idea being I use these methods now and it's much more sustainable. Let's talk a little bit about supplementation. And I know a lot gets made about supplementation for natural bodybuilders, but I keep it pretty simple. I'm going to talk about 4 key supplements that I think can really impact a natural bodybuilder in a positive manner. First and foremost, you got to be taking your creatine. Why? Creatine improves your performance in the gym. It increases lean body mass. It's going to help your performance, and it's going to help protect that muscle while you're dieting. The second most important thing when it comes to a supplement for me is going to be a protein powder. Why? Ease of access, ease of use. Protein is actually very challenging to get in. And guess what? Whey protein is the best protein source for complete amino acid profile. It's wonderful, and it's easy to bring with you if you need a meal. Keeping whey protein on you when you travel helps keep you on your goals. Now, could you get away with eating all your meals from food? Yes, I've done it, because for years I was allergic to whey. But when Core Nutritionals came out with my own brand for vegan protein, and I love it. I love how it tastes. I love the texture. So I feel like I've been saved. But you can do it the other way. But I do feel like, remember, this is a supplement. We're just supplementing, and I love the idea of protein powder. The third, and it's going to really help with what I mentioned earlier, is an essential fatty acid. Now, Core Nutritionals, guys, if you want to support me and support this channel, I love giving you guys free information, but Core Nutritionals, I've been with them for a decade, okay? They make the best products, and essential fatty acids are wonderful. When you are restricting calories and you're not getting a lot of fats, it is important that you're getting quality fats. Essential fatty acids are going to really help hormone production, and it's going to help you continue to be successful in your fat loss goals during that time. Now, the fourth product is something that, well, if you know me, you know I talk about it quite a bit. It's my number one fat loss supplement for athletes that are trying to get shredded. It's called Core Hard. It contains DIM and it contains KSM 66, which is a version of ashwagandha, lowers cortisol. Cortisol being the hormone associated with stress. And guess what you're doing to your body with all this cardio, all this training, all this trying to get leaner? That's right. You're going to be a little bit stressed. And I have found just the best response to this product. I start having my athletes take it just before bed. And then as prep continues or as dieting continues, I have them take it after their morning cardio and then before bed. And at the end, we're taking it 3 times a day, 200 milligrams each. I just find wonderful response to this throughout the process. So if you're not taking Core Hard, that is a wonderful, wonderful product. It's almost a requirement. I guess I should just say it is a requirement for all my athletes. It just does wonderful things. The final thing we're going to talk about is how long should it take you to actually get shredded? This is something that first we have to define what is shredded for you. What is shredded for me is when I get on a bodybuilding stage and I have striations in my hamstrings and my glutes. My lower back is completely shredded. My abs are completely etched out. It's probably in the 5, 6, 7% body fat range, which may not be necessary. For some people, being shredded is when you can just start to see a little bit of abs. You can see a little bit of cap in the shoulder, maybe 12% body fat, right? Somewhere in between there might be where you're at, but you got to define what's shredded for you. So when you ask somebody how long it takes you to get shredded, it's going to come down to your starting position. And why does it matter where your starting position is? Because for natural people, you need to take your time, okay? There is going to be a severe reaction to fat loss if you go down to 7% body fat and you do it the wrong way. And what do I mean by the wrong way? All the things I just said. You're not protecting your muscle. You are not protecting your metabolism. You're not taking recovery during the process. And you're really starting to see some problems hormonally, hunger, physically, emotionally. So how do you protect against that? Clearly, the research shows this. I've also seen it myself with my own physique and also the athletes that I coach. You don't really want to be losing more than 1 to 1.5% of your body weight per week, right? So if you're at 200 pounds, you don't really want to be losing more than 3 pounds a week, right? 2 to 3 pounds a week. That's a pretty good week actually, right? So I coach a lot of females that compete in bodybuilding. They're often, in the 100 to 130 pound range. I'm really happy when I see them lose a pound a week, right? When you're losing a pound of body fat per week, that is very significant, okay? And it's very important that we do this. Why? Because we want to protect the body along the way. If you diet too hard, Think of it like a pendulum. It's going to come back the other way. So give yourself time. If you've got 30 pounds to lose to get shredded, don't try to do it in 10 weeks. Okay, don't try to do it in 6 or 7 weeks. Because why? Even if you lose 4 or 5 pounds that first week or 2 or 3 pounds that first week, you're going to run into some barriers with the body adapting, with you physically getting exhausted. And more than likely, if you set unrealistic expectations in your body, you're just going to get burnt out and think, well, it's not worth it. However, if you give yourself some guilt-free stops along the way, I call them diet breaks, where we say, hey, we've been dieting pretty hard. Let's take a recovery week, bring calories up to maintenance, maybe 15, 20% more than you are at in your deficit. Take cardio where it's at and cut that about in half, and just allow the body to kind of refresh. It's going to restore some hormones. It's going to restore some digestion. It's going to restore some mental clarity. It's going to restore some excitement, some performance in the gym. And guess what? I've even had people start a diet break and lose body fat that week. Why? Because by restoring all these things, you're really putting that equation in your favor to lose body fat. So crazy things can happen when you don't make huge changes. Okay, you can really protect the physique. And this is how we get world champion athletes that are also doing great after a competition. Okay, Brian is looking incredible. Now, he is an incredible athlete. He just competed last year in November and won the world championship. And Daraja, well, she got pregnant shortly after the Olympia. Yeah, she's healthy. Okay, so this is the goal for me as a coach, is to make sure that I'm not only putting people in position to compete and win at the highest level, but also taking care of them, right? I consider that very important part of my job. Any idiot can just murder somebody and get them on stage and leave them wrecked. And I say idiot because I see it all the time. They reach out to me regretting what they have done. Now, nobody regrets the hard work. So while you're in it, you're going to be putting in the work. But just make sure that you are giving yourself time. And guys, if you want to set up a consultation with me or my team, just go to prophysique.com, sign up, no cost, and we can discuss coaching. But the goal for me is to give you guys the tools to do this yourself. So let me know if you have any questions below about this process. We can break it down a little further, specifically based on what you guys need to hear. All right, I'll talk to you guys tomorrow.